Red Rising, released on January 28, 2014, is the first book within Pierce Brown's science fiction dystopian quasi-young adult novel series called Red Rising. And today, after a lot of hoopla from so many of you guys, and also a lot of hoopla from my real-life best friend who refuses to watch my channel until I finally read the Red Rising series, I am finally going to read said first book, Red Rising. So given that this is a very special occasion and it is a very highly requested book, I decided to go a little bit higher than I would for some of the other books that I typically read for this channel and actually get the special edition illustrated version of Red Rising. Actually, that's a lie. This is not really much of an illustrated edition. It just has like 2 illustrations in here, and it's got sprayed edges and foil slipcases, so you don't have to purchase this thing, but I thought it'd just be really nice to do for this very special occasion. So without further ado, let's go ahead and finally open this shrink-wrapped, hardcover, sprayed edge version of Red Rising and see what this hyped up book is all about. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we've got the special shrink-wrapped version here of Red Rising, and we're gonna go ahead and open up this bad boy. Let's take a look at what's on the inside of this thing. Yeah, this little sticker here that tells you all the things that are available: sprayed edges, foil slipcase, full wrap, illustrated case. So again, it's not something that's super necessary. If you have the mass market version of Red Rising, it's pretty much just the same story, just with a fresh coat of paint, a new coat of paint on it. But yeah, so we've got this lovely young lady here. I don't know who this is. I look forward to finding out who this auburn-haired lady is. She kind of looks like Melisandre from the Song of Ice and Fire series a little bit. But yeah, we've got this lady in red right here. Red Rising, Pierce Brown, Del Rey, of course, publishing industry's got to get its name. My love, remember the cries when winter died for spring skies. I look forward to finding out what that means. And of course, the Red Rising hardcover book that's inside here. Let's take a look inside. Oh, okay, yeah, we've got, this looks like a mech. Oh, someone's standing outside. Is that like an astronaut? Or astronaut who's just kind of outside his mech-looking, Gundam-looking, Xenoblade-looking spaceship. Very cool. Yeah, we've got the sprayed edges right here, of course. That seems to be in vogue with a lot of special edition versions of a lot of books that are coming out these days. And then we've got another gentleman here, and I don't know if he's flying or if he's being lifted by these mechanical contraptions. We've got this dystopian-looking rocky city here in the background. I don't know what that is, but I imagine it's dystopian, given this is dystopian young adult science fiction. And yeah, Red Rising again, Del Rey. So, I mean, it's pretty cool. I'm glad. So this was actually $50 here at my local bookstore. You can actually get it on Amazon for way cheaper than that, but I wanted to support my local bookstore, so I just wanted to see what this was all about. And yeah, so let's open up this book. And okay, cool. Yeah, we've got, okay, this is starting to seem a little bit more worth it. I mean, it's subjective. I don't know if this is worth $50, but I'm regretting my purchase a little bit less and less the more I look at this book. We've got this map of the solar system right here, the Time of Plenty, commissioned by Sovereign Octavia Aulun, 740 PCE. I don't know what that means. Past Common Era? I have no idea. Got Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune. Kind of very, I haven't read The Expanse, but it seems to be very Expanse-like, where in The Expanse you have people living on Earth, Mars, and along the asteroid belt. Seems to me that Red Rising is going a little above and beyond here, where you've got, and I haven't read the series, I don't know what this is about, but I imagine you have people living on more planets than just Earth, Mars, and the asteroid belt. All right, cool. I think this is the same dystopian castle-like thing that we saw up here in the front cover. Yeah, this dystopian, I think that's like a fortress, a castle-like fortress. Here you've got a more simplistic looking castle. Pretty cool. Kind of standing on this rocky pedestal. You've got this moon rising up from the mountains. Oh wait, this folds. Oh, okay, cool. It folds outward like that. So yeah, it is this rocky castle thing. And then yeah, you've got the actual book proper, Red Rising, about to begin. Yes, the other books in the series, Red Rising, Golden Sun, Morning Star, Iron Gold, Dark Age, and Lightbringer, If I enjoy this book well enough, and if this video does pretty good, and if you guys really, really want me to check out some of the other books in the series, I can definitely be tempted to continue the series and check out Golden Sun and Morning Star. I've heard wonderful things about books 2 and 3 of the Red Rising series. Red Rising, Pierce Brown. This downward arrow, it kind of looks like the emblem for male and female, you know, little cross and a circle on top of a cross and a circle and the arrow, that kind of thing. So I'd be curious to see what significance this symbol has. To Father who taught me to walk. And then, yeah, we've got another map right here. Okay. I guess this book might take place predominantly on Mars. I'm not really sure. Again, I know nothing about this series just beyond it being a young adult dystopian sci-fi. So I'm expecting some young adult tropes here. I'm expecting some Hunger Games-ish tropes, but I'm seeing here a map. So it's like, okay, cool. There's a little bit more layers to this than just it being your standard fare Hunger Games young adult style book. And then, oh, we've got that other poem here, right here. The poem that we saw in the back of the actual box set. A Tale of Winter Done, A Tale of Winter Done. I am not a poet, and I'm not really an enjoyer of poetry, but I guess it's cool to have here. And then, I guess this is the prologue, and this is where we begin. All right, cool, cool, cool. So I look forward to delving more into this book proper. I must say that the text here looks absolutely gorgeous. As I'm going through this, I'm not regretting the $50 purchase as much anymore. And of course the sprayed edges right here on each and every page. I want to see if we have anything here close to the end of the book, if there's any other illustrations here at the end of the book. About the author, about the type. Oh, this book was set in Saban, a typeface. Okay, yeah, the Saban typeface looks absolutely beautiful. Whoever decided this typeface, you know, round of applause for them. It looks absolutely gorgeous. Bunch of blank pages, trying to fool me into thinking these are going to be illustrated pages, but they're not. And then, yeah, we've got that map again of the solar system that we had here earlier, so pretty cool, pretty cool. And then, yeah, that's the back of the book cover with the kind of the Xenoblade mech-looking device here behind this astronaut. So I don't know what to expect going into this series. I've heard, again, that this is a very popular series. I've also heard that the writing can be very young adult-ish. I've also heard that the first book is rather controversial. It's either a love it or hate it kind of thing. Again, I look forward to formulating my own thoughts. So follow along with me as we go through my first ever read-through of Red Rising, and I give you guys my own opinion on what I think about this book. So let's get to it. Hey guys, wanted to give you guys a quick heads up to where I'm currently at here with regards to Red Rising. And by the way, guys, from this point forward, there will be spoilers for my entire read through of this book. So if you have not read the Red Rising book, then definitely skip ahead to my final, hopefully spoiler-free thoughts on this book. But so far, I'm currently about a couple pages into chapter 5 of Red Rising. And I gotta say, all in all, I'm very much invested in this world, invested in this story so far that we have. So I won't lie, when I first started reading this book, I was a little bit disappointed because the first 2 chapters of this book were definitely a little bit obtuse, a little bit just, I got the gist of what was going on. You know, you've got Darrow on this planet of Mars, this planet that they're trying to essentially make hospitable for the people of planet Earth, the golds that are living on planet Earth, the golds being the cream of the crop people. You've got these different hierarchies of this caste system of people where you've got the golds at the top, and then below that you've got grays and then coppers, and essentially the people who belong to the red category of people are the ones that are essentially the lowest of the low. They're the lowest people on the totem pole. So, you know, I got the gist of it, but it was a very obtuse writing style where it's like, oh, the tram link, oh, this and that. There were words, vernacular that was being used during the series that I was having a little bit of a hard time wrapping my mind around what exactly these words meant. But now that we're a little bit further into the book, I kind of got a grasp as to like what's going on, the story, the certain terms and vernacular that are used, what Helldiver means, what a laurel means, kind of those kinds of things. And yeah, and the other thing that I was also a little bit disappointed on when I first was reading this book was also the character of Io. So Io is essentially this young girl, this young woman here, and her character definitely seemed to be just like, at first anyway, seemed to be just like a box standard love interest character who eventually turned into like a, I'm all for the rebellion. We, the Reds, have to rebel against the Golds and have to take back the world that is rightfully for us, the Reds. And it seemed rather one-dimensional, but I will say that this book has definitely picked up tremendously from the end of chapter 4 through to the beginning of chapter 5, because we just witnessed the execution of Io, the character, and I'm like, oh, okay. You know, if she was a character that was going to continue to be alive, I was hoping that we were going to add more layers to her character, where she wasn't just going to be your box standard love interest and box standard rebel against the goals of the society. But no, she actually is a martyr. It's like, okay, yes, we've got more layers here beneath the surface for this story. She is being culled off. And this scene that's actually pretty well done. This thing that I thought was just poetry here, it's the Song of Death, and she sings it, and that is inevitably what causes her execution by the Golds as she hangs from a noose. And then Darrow, in this very just tragically dark scene, has to pull her down in order to properly break her neck to end her suffering, so that she breaks her neck on the noose, given that the gravity of Mars is lesser than the gravity of Earth. So even though she's hanging, she's just struggling to breathe and she can't properly die. And it's just very dark and very depressing and very well done. I'm like, okay, wow, all right. We've got a good story here going on now. And I am more invested in this story than I initially was when I first read this book, where I was kind of having a little bit of a hard time with some of the vernacular, and I was just struggling a little bit with the character of Io. But now that we've got this purpose for Darrow, where he has had to kill his significant other, I am curious to see where it goes from here. I imagine he's going to go on a vengeful path where he's going to try to take down the Golds and, you know, spit in their face and be like, oh, the Golds have done this, so we the Reds have to rise up. And then it's eventually going to turn into this quest where perhaps Darrow might have to learn a lesson or two about revenge, about how revenge doesn't exactly bring back Io, and he'll learn a couple lessons about how vengeance doesn't solve anything. I assume that's where the story is going, but I'm still keen to see where this goes. So all in all, so far, I'm very interested in Red Rising. Despite a little bit of a rough intro, it's been beginning that I'm more invested in. I'm invested in the story now, and I'm excited to see where it goes.
All right, guys, it's a new day. I'm currently here on chapter 16. And I got to say that I've been thoroughly enjoying my adventure throughout my read through of this book. It's definitely not been as young adultish as I originally imagined. I mean, it hasn't been the most complicated read, but a lot of the tropes that I was afraid of that I was going to interact when I first started reading this book have surprisingly not appeared all that much. Really, it's just been the kind of Hunger Games style. We have to rise up as the poor people of society and rebel against the evil rich people of this world, or in this case, of this galaxy. Trope that is present, kind of similar to the Hunger Games, but I'm sure the Hunger Games wasn't the first IP to delve into that rebellious archetype type of story. So despite that rebellion style type of story not exactly being new here with regards to Red Rising, it also wasn't entirely new with regards to the Hunger Games. So I'll forgive it, because it's still been a very engaging read. So I'm currently at the part in the story where Darrow has just taken his test. He is about to enter into the Institute. And yeah, so it's been an interesting story so far. I have very much enjoyed Darrow slowly beginning to wearing the mask of a Gold and training up to become like a Gold, talk like a Gold, quack like a Gold, all the things that one needs to immerse themselves into Golden culture in order to be one of them and essentially wear their mask. I've definitely enjoyed that stuff, and I definitely look forward to seeing more interactions Darrow potentially may have with other actual real life Golds once we get to that part of the story. I'm very keen to see if any of the Golds will kind of suss out the fact that Darrow is actually just a Red in disguise. I've been a sucker for all that stuff. I am very curious though about, earlier in this video I was complaining about the character of Io, and although the character of Io wasn't exactly my favorite when this book first started out, she definitely grew on me after her death as a symbol, as a martyr for Darrow to kind of latch onto and realize that, like, okay, well, I've got to do something now, because this was the dream of my wife. This was Io's dream in order to take down the establishment from within, and I've got to do something. I've got to do this in her name. So I thought that was interesting, but now I'm at the part of the story where it definitely seems that Darrow may have happened upon a beautiful girl who is also a Gold, who may also potentially be Io. And we're not sure by this point if she is Io. I mean, I don't know if she is Io. This is my first time reading this story, but I hope that it is not Io. I hope that Io is in fact dead. I'm not exactly the biggest fan of stories where they kill off a character and then the authors don't commit to killing off that character. And the reason for that is because death is such a powerful storytelling tool and it can evoke so many emotions from the reader. So whenever an author decides to say like, oh, actually, yeah, that character's not really dead. It's just a fake out moment. He or she is actually still alive. Whoopsie. I just find that so cheap. It cheapens the story. It cheapens the emotional investment that one had in those characters. And it also makes me suspicious of any deaths that may happen down the road where it's like, okay, well, we've already had one fake out death, and now you're asking me to emotionally invest in a potential another death if another death does happen in this story. Why am I going to become emotionally involved in this death if it could potentially just be another fake out death? So I'm praying, I'm hoping that Io is in fact staying dead, and this golden girl is merely just someone who looks like Io and reminds Darrow of Io, but isn't actually a Io who was pulled out from the noose and given a new life and was disguised as a gold. I really hope that's not the case, but we shall see. But that aside, all in all, I've definitely enjoyed my time with the story thus far. It's definitely a page turner. I can definitely see why a lot of people really like this book. And again, I'm only about 30% of the way through this story, so I can only imagine how much potentially better this story gets down the line, how much potentially better this series gets down the line. So yeah, 110 pages in, up to chapter 16 here. We've had a good time thus far, and I look forward to seeing if we continue to have a good time down the line.
Hello and good morning, guys. Here to provide you guys another update on my current read through of the hardcover version of Red Rising. I am currently on page 178/179, and for those of you who don't know, that's about a page or two into chapter 24, the chapter called Titus's War. And so far, it's been actually a very interesting, immersive read so far, much more immersive than I thought it was originally going to be. I think I went into this book kind of with not the highest expectations. I had heard it's a young adult book, I had heard it's controversial, I had heard that not everybody likes this book, so I was expecting very Hunger Games style, young adultish style tropes, potentially a romance, potentially just very young adult vernacular, a lot of telling, not showing, spelling out of the message. And to my surprise, this book has actually just been, I mean, yes, there is a lot of Hunger Games stuff going on in here, but it's kind of providing its own twist on the Hunger Games formula. And again, not that Hunger Games is a original thought. I mean, a lot of Hunger Games is kind of taking inspiration from a lot of other rebellion, rise up against the machine style stories that came before the Hunger Games. But the Hunger Games is the thing that my brain immediately goes to. But yeah, so far I've really, really liked it. For those of you who don't know, I actually take notes during my read-throughs of the books that I read and review for the purposes of this channel, and I guess I can show you guys what I have. So yeah, these are the notes that I've taken so far during my read-through of Red Rising. Right now I have about a page and a half here of notes, and yeah, so as you guys can see, I've been very, very studious in my read-through. I've definitely come to really appreciate some of the things that Pierce Brown has done with this book, even though, again, there is this Hunger Games style story about Rise Against the Machine, and even there's actually a game that is currently going on. I'm currently in the middle of a kind of capture the flag style tournament where Darrow and Cassius and his team of Team Mars are going up against all these other different houses of golds as they all try to prove who is the most superior. So even though there is a game here going on in the story, which I imagine, is this going to be the rest of the book, just to capture the flag game? It sounds very climax-ish, but it's been interesting. It's been interesting. Again, it's a new twist on the same old formula that we've all kind of come to know and love. I appreciate how the golds, you know, you get to this point in the story where Darrow is essentially a gold. He's undercover. He's blending in pretty well. But it's very interesting to me that his notion of like, oh, you know, all these golds are the same. They're all the same kind of douchebags. That hasn't really been the case. You know, he's met all these different various characters. He's met Cassius, who seems to have more layers underneath the surface despite his arrogant facade. There seems to be more to several. There seems to be more to Antonia. There seems to be more to these characters than just them being arrogant douchebags. And I'm looking forward to seeing what else we uncover here with these characters, because again, I really appreciate a story when it has more nuance and it's not just good guy Reds rebelling against the evil golds. So it's been interesting. It's been interesting. I look forward to seeing how this story moves along. Obviously, Darrow's main mission here is to reach as high a position as possible within Gold Society so that he can then use his military prowess to help the Reds overcome the Gold tyranny and essentially destroy the slave system that currently exists. There's been one really good scene up to this point so far, and it's when Darrow was forced to kill Julian, and it's pretty dark and sad, and a reminder that really, like, the Gold students here don't really have as much power as Darrow thought they did, and it's mainly the Institute, it's mainly the government here that holds the real power, not the families, and it's just been really, really good. So yeah, I look forward to seeing what else happens within the story. I'm invested. It hasn't been this 5-star amazing read thus far, but it also hasn't been this 0-star overrated, very young adult trope-ish style book either. So I'm very invested regardless. I'm looking forward to seeing what else happens in the story, and yeah, we'll check back later. All right, guys, back at you with another update, and I am on page 202/203, so about 2 pages into chapter 27, The House of Rage, and all in all, I must say that I'm still invested in this story, still enjoying Red Rising for the most part. However, I am starting to get to a point now where I am beginning to grow a little bit weary of the story, and I think that mainly just has to do with the direction that Pierce Brown has taken Darrow's journey in this story. So, in the beginning of the book, obviously we come to know that the Golds are evil people and they kill EO, and then they're under the belief that they killed Darrow, and so then he is now undercover as a Gold. So we've got the stakes pretty much in our heads. We know what Darrow has to do. However, him reaching that goalpost in the story where he is to rebel and create this uprising for the Reds, we haven't gotten to that part of the story quite yet. And although I completely understand needing to create the story and build characters and create all these things in order to get us to that goalpost destination of Darrow succeeding in his Red rebellious uprising, I do think that Pierce Brown has gotten a little bit lost in the sauce somewhere along the way to reach that destination. So right now he is in the Institute, with his goal being that he wants to become the head person, the valedictorian of this institute, so that he graduates with top honors and is therefore someone of super high caliber, a peerless guard, so that he can then potentially have a lot of power at his disposal. And Darrow's goal, at least up to this point in the story, is that he wants to have a fleet that he can then use to turn on the Golds and thus help the Reds rise, hence Red Rising, against the Gold tyranny. However, I do think somewhere along the way here, Pierce Brown has begun to maybe lose sight of that valedictorian destination. So I understand that this Capture the Flag game is supposed to be a microcosm of society at large, and it's supposed to be teaching the Golds, I mean, Darrow already knows this, but it's supposed to be teaching a lot of the Golds that, oh shoot, this is just like how our real life society works in this galaxy. We've got this slave caste system, only it is metaphoricalized within this game of Capture the Flag. And it's cute and it's good. But I do think that the stakes have now become a little bit more obtuse, a little bit more vague now that we're in this Capture the Flag game. And I'm beginning to grow a little bit weary of this Capture the Flag game. I'm beginning to get a little bit like, why does this need to be important for this story? And the only thing I can think of as to why Pierce Brown may have included this Capture the Flag game here is because he wants to create this friendship between Cassius and Darrow. He wants us as the reader to become invested in these other characters. Wants us to become invested with Cassius, with Severo, with Antonia, all these different characters. Pierce Brown wants us to become invested in those characters because he has something important planned for them down the line. And although that's great, and I'm happy that he's building out these characters and building our investment within these other potential people who may or may not get killed off by the end of the series, I do think there were better ways to develop these characters without kind of getting lost in this Capture the Flag game that, again, just feels distant and far removed from Darrow's goal of wanting to ultimately rebel and succeed in his uprising for the Reds. So that's where I'm at right now. And the quote that just really just elicited this thought within me is here in page 202, where Darrow thinks to himself, "It's hard to remember I'm doing all this for EO." Which just goes to show you that even Darrow is kind of lost sight of what his overall goal is supposed to be. And maybe in a way, even Pierce Brown has kind of forgotten what the overall goal of the story is supposed to be. So he had to throw in that line about like, oh shoot, yeah, like EO is still the goal. EO's dream of this rebellious uprising is still the goal. Yeah, despite the fact that this capture the flag game is going on. And again, the capture the flag game so far has been, fun and entertaining and all, but it does lack the stakes of what this story is supposed to be. It does lack the stakes of what this rebellion is supposed to be. And I am beginning to grow weary. So we'll see if that weariness continues in these next couple of chapters. We'll see if my desire to see the outcome of this capture the flag game improves as we delve deeper into this book. But yeah, I just thought I should film this little snippet here just to inform you guys as to what I'm thinking about the story so far. So yeah, let's keep reading and see what's up. What's up, ladies and gentlemen? We're back at it again. We're here currently on Chapter 35, Oathbreaker, which is page 277 of my special hardcover edition of Red Rising. And so far, I'm actually a little bit more invested than what I was in my previous update. So previously, I was a little bit conflicted on my feelings with regards to the Capture the Flag game that is currently going on here during this testing that is happening to Darrow and all the other golds here at the Institute. However, after spending a little bit more time here with some of these tests, I've come to appreciate some, not all, of the things that Pierce Brown is trying to do here via this Capture the Flag game. One of the things that I do think is working for me with this book is just some of the plot twist reveals that Pierce Brown continues to reveal throughout this story that continue to keep you turning the page and being like, oh snap, like I did not expect this type of twist to happen either so early, so soon in the story, or just at all. And it's definitely gotten me to continue to be hooked and engaged to the story and keeping me turning the page to try to find out what other potential plot twists there are with regards to this story. So one of the twists that had been previously hinted at during Darrow's time with Dancer and Harmony was the potential that there are maybe even other Reds currently hiding undercover amongst the Society of Golds, and some may even be taking the tests right now at the Institute. And lo and behold, one of these undercover people is in fact Titus, whom I did not expect to be a Red, considering that he was portrayed so villainously and so like this giant evil monster. So I just expected him to be another evil Gold, but lo and behold, he wound up being a Red who had become so cynical and so angry towards the Golds that he was willing to kill other people who are Golds just to sate his own vengeful, villainous desires. And I thought that was a pretty well done twist. I probably should have seen it coming. I feel kind of foolish in hindsight. It's like, well, of course, there's going to be another Red potentially besides Darrow here within this Institute taking this test right now. But I didn't expect it to be Titus, and I didn't expect it to happen so soon, that a reveal of another Red being here amongst the Golds would happen so soon in the story. So that kind of caught me off guard. I thought that was a really nice twist, and I do like how it plays into Darrow's own philosophy about like, Titus, this is who I could become if I let myself become consumed by this desire for vengeance, and potentially a warning or maybe even a foreshadowing of what might happen to Darrow's character if he continues down this path of trying to take down the Golds. So I thought that was pretty well done. I also liked how Darrow's a very logical, very smart person, at least up until this point in the story. So he logics out that like, okay, well, I definitely want Cassius as my ally because I know it would help me in the future to have this very powerful noble family by my side. So I will allow Cassius to execute Titus, even though it makes more sense within the politics of our currently established Gold hierarchy that we have in this game for me to do the execution. And so he lets Cassius do the execution, and it's a big mistake because then his people kind of lose a little bit of respect for Darrow. And in addition to that, Cassius is very vengeful driven as well, and he blames Titus for the death of Julian, Cassius's brother. So that was a neat little wrinkle into the story. I very much appreciated that. However, what I did not expect was that throughout this story, they had been hinting that Darrow, it's only a matter of time before Cassius finds out that it was you who killed Julian and it wasn't Titus. It's only a matter of time before this reveal happens. And I'm like, oh man, I'm fully expecting heartbreak and it being this traumatic thing down the line. But no, Pierce Brown decides to have that friendship breakup happen 2/3 of the way through the story, which I won't lie, I think I was a little bit disappointed by that reveal. Not necessarily because it was a bad reveal, but it happened a little bit too quickly for my liking, and I think this is a personal subjective preference, because I know this is based on my own desires for what I expected from this story. Because I saw the potential here for like, oh man, like Cassius and Darrow are slowly becoming friends, they're becoming brothers. I can't wait to see how much more this story develops over the course of the series, so that by the time that this breakup happens where Cassius finds out that it was Darrow who killed Julian and not anyone else, then it will feel all the more heartbreaking, because we would have potentially had even more pages and even more books worth of development for this friendship to develop and bud and become a true brotherhood, as opposed to it just kind of happening here willy-nilly at the 2/3 point of the story. And I was a bit disappointed by that, because again, I felt like there was so much more unrealized potential with where this friendship and brotherhood could potentially grow before the breakup happens. So instead, Pierce just decides to break up these friends when, you know, Cassius and Darrow did feel like friends, but they didn't really feel like brothers yet. I was hoping that that breakup didn't happen until much, much, much later in the series. Another thing that I am being potentially wary of, and I noticed it the first time that Darrow laid eyes on Mustang before he knew her as Mustang, I was wary that, like, okay, is Io not really dead? Was she also rescued by the Sons of Ares and also pretending to be a gold right now, and they've placed this gold wig on her, and Io is in essence this Mustang person? I kind of started sussing that out from the very first moment we were introduced to Mustang. And now, throughout the course of the story, the further on we've gotten into the story, and the fact that Mustang rescued Darrow from his near-fatal injury after Darrow's duel with Cassius, nursed him back to health, and Darrow is reminded so much of Io from Mustang's character, I have a sneaking suspicion, and I don't know this for a fact. Maybe Pierce Brown is hopefully going to subvert my expectations here, because he's kind of leaning really super hard into this, like, oh, Mustang and Io are a lot alike, maybe they're the same person, so perhaps it is intentional on his behalf that it's trying to make me think that it's the same character, just to lull me into a false sense of security, when at the end he's going to pull out the rug from under us and be like, no, Io is actually dead and Mustang is just a completely different person, which I hope that is the case, because if Mustang truly does wind up being Io, I think that would be such a disappointment for the story, because again, I really don't like it when authors do these fake out deaths. I mean, you can do a fake out death once in a story. I think that's my limit. Like, you can do it once. But when it happens twice, thrice, 4 times, death just loses all sorts of significance within the story that the author is trying to tell. But we'll see if Io winds up being Mustang. I'm still enjoying the story. I'm still hooked to read what happens next. We currently have this potential duel budding on the horizon between the Jackal and Darrow, where it has just been revealed that the Institute has been bribed by the Archgovernor to allow the Jackal, being the Archgovernor's son, to try to win the game, essentially rig the game in the Jackal's favor so that the Jackal wins, which is a nice wrinkle in the story that the Institute can also be bought out for nefarious purposes. And then in addition to that, despite the fact that I'm not a fan of Cassius and Darrow's breakup having happened so early on in the series, I'm looking forward to seeing the potential meetup once again between these two characters now that they are on opposite sides of this fence. So there's a lot to look forward to still with regards to this story. I'm still enjoying what I have read. I'm just personally a little bit disappointed by unrealized potential that Pierce Brown has left on the table, and him missing opportunities to make this story more powerful than it already is. But, we'll keep reading and we'll see what happens next. Good to see you again, comrades. I'm currently on chapter 40, page 329 of Red Rising. So I'm getting here pretty close to the end of the book. I would say about 80% of the way through this story, and unless something dramatically changes here at the end of the book, I think I've established kind of what I think my overall thoughts on this story are going to be. So prior to me reading this book, I had heard so many people saying that they absolutely love this series, that it's absolutely engaging and it's absolutely keeps you turning the page. And there are certainly aspects about this book that have definitely kept me turning the page. I definitely enjoy some of the twists that have come along the way. However, this book, Red Rising, although very much enjoyable, it's not a story that will stick with me. The Capture the Flag game, although has been good, it definitely kind of came a little bit out of left field here, where again, we As the reader, maybe we're expecting the rebellion to take center stage here within the story, but much like the Hunger Games, the actual rebellion doesn't happen until much later in the series. Henceforth, similarly here in Red Rising, the rebellion is probably being held off to a later book. And Pierce Brown probably elected to do that because he wanted us as a reader to become more invested in the friendships that Darrow is currently fostering amongst his other ragtag group of friends, such as Mustang and Severo, and potentially the rivalry with Cassius. I have no idea how that's going to end. I'm looking forward to seeing what happens there with Cassius and Darrow, as I imagine there's going to be a final confrontation that's going to happen here at the end of the book, in addition to obviously the confrontation between the Jackal and Darrow. So I imagine Pierce Brown intentionally held off a lot of the rebellious stuff until later on in the series so that we become more invested in these characters, so that whenever it comes time for Pierce Brown to potentially rip our heart apart by killing off these characters, it will mean something. So in that regard, I respect Pierce Brown for taking time to develop these characters. But on the other hand, I would have liked maybe a little bit more clarity that that's what this first book was going to be about, that it wasn't really going to be anything about a rebellion. It was going to be mainly about the trials and games that take place within the politics of the Institute, and the cheating and the arch-governor's son and the little factions that have been created here and there throughout this game. I think having more clarity on that's what this book was going to be about, would have helped to adjust my expectations so that I didn't expect this book to be a rebellion, and instead I expected this book to be more of a kind of Hunger Games style competition. So that has definitely been a little bit of a personal disappointment of mine. The other thing that I haven't also been too big of a fan of are the characters themselves. Since Pierce Brown is asking me to invest in the relationships that Darrow is currently fostering with some of the other characters, I would have hoped that Pierce Brown would have been able to actually make those characters feel more like real people. And although the characters that we've met along the way, such as again Cassius, Mustang, and Severo, haven't been one-dimensional, I definitely do feel like they're not as complex as maybe what I would like. And maybe that comes from my own personal reading history, where I've read the A Song of Ice and Fire series before. I've read First Law, so I know what fully realized, nuanced characters look like. So when I see something that is also telling me to invest in the characters of their story, but it is not the same level of nuance and three-dimensional fully realization that I've seen in the A Song of Ice and Fire series or in the First Law trilogy, then that does kind of disappoint me quite a bit. With exception of Darrow, I just don't really have a good vibe on these characters. Severo is the cool loner guy who wears a wolf pelt, and although that's cool, I don't really know much more about this character besides that. Mustang is the rebellious girl, but she's also really beautiful and a potential love interest here for Darrow. And although again that can be interesting, up to this point in the story, I have yet to really fully engage with the character of Mustang. She doesn't feel like a fully well-realized character. Really, it's just Darrow and maybe Cassius a little bit who feel like characters. Everyone else has just kind of felt more like not much more than archetypes. So I'm hoping that as we get closer to the end of this book, and especially as we delve further into the series, these characters develop more and more. But as it stands here at Red Rising, I won't lie, I have been a little bit disappointed with how not as deep and complex the characters have been, and also just with the direction that the story has gone here from the beginning, because as I mentioned before, I was hoping that this was going to be more of a rebellious uprising story, and instead what I got was a capture the flag game, which has been fun, but the stakes haven't really been as grand as what I initially expected. So that's how I'm feeling so far with regards to this book. Again, those thoughts may change as we finish off this book. I think this will probably be my last update before we finish off this story, so I'm hoping to get some good reading time in later today to hopefully finish the last 60 or so pages of this book and finally put a bow on this book that has been a mostly good time, a decently above average time, but hasn't really wowed me to the extent that maybe The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson has, or A Storm of Swords by George R. R. Martin has. But this book still has time to kind of go over the top, and maybe the best stuff is still yet to come in some of the other books later down on the series, so we'll have to wait and see for that. But until then, I'll meet you guys here for the end of the book.
that's a wrap, ladies and gentlemen. As of this recording, I have officially completed my first ever read of the Red Rising book. And I'll give my final thoughts here in a bit, but I just want to kind of quickly discuss here my thoughts on these last couple of pages that I read since my last update. All in all, my thoughts and feelings that I had in that update are pretty much the same now that we've finished the book. There was nothing really here at the end that completely changed my mindset or completely just blew my mind away with like, whoa, oh my gosh, what the heck is this? This completely puts this book over the top for me. My feelings on this book, which were that it was an above average read with some characters that could be a little bit more layered, that feeling is still pretty much present here now that we've finished this book. And one of the things that kind of became glaringly obvious for me is Pierce Brown has a very interesting way of writing dialogue. He almost has this Brandon Sanderson-esque desire to make his characters say really epic things or things that the author personally believes sound epic. But in my opinion, and again, this is my own personal subjective book snob of an opinion, the things that are being said here are incredibly cheesy and way too cliche and way too out there that I can't take them seriously. They're just like, oh my gosh, this completely backfired Pierce Brown. Like, oh my gosh, you're trying to make Darrow sound so cool and epic, yet it just comes across as so hammy. And I love a good cheesy read every now and then, but I don't think that's what Pierce Brown was going for. Some of the examples that I noted down here in my notebook were here on page 321 after Darrow has just killed Apollo. He looks up to one of the other proctors, the proctors that are currently helping the Jackal cheat, and he tells Jupiter, "Jupiter, you are next." And I just couldn't help myself but laugh at just how cheesy and over the top that line sounded. It's very much like a Marvel Cinematic Universe line, those lines that sound just awfully cheesy and just so bad. Another line here is closer to the end of the book, page 373 in my hardcover edition of Red Rising, when Darrow, when he was contemplating to take the Archgovernor's offer to be his son, his golden son, Darrow thinks to himself as he's speaking to this villain, "He is wrong. I am the spark that will set the world afire. I am the hammer that cracks the chains." And although I know Pierce Brown maybe thought that this sounded really cool and epic and like, oh man, what an excellent way to end this book, I'm sorry, to me, once again, it just comes across as just incredibly cheesy. It very much reminds me of the cheesier dialogue sections from my least favorite POV character in the A Song of Ice and Fire series, Daenerys Targaryen, when she would say, "I am the breaker of chains." And I just couldn't help myself but groan at the dialogue and the things Daenerys was saying. That's pretty much what this felt like. Darrow's dialogue here felt a lot like the cheesier, less good versions of Daenerys's already pretty nonsensical dialogue. So the writing here was a tad cheesy, but to give Pierce Brown his props, I must say that I did want to continue turning the page to keep finding out what happens next here at the end. There were a couple of neat little twists and wrinkles that he inserted into the story here in the final fifth of this book, such as Lucian actually being the Jackal, and also the reveal that Mustang is Virginia Au Augustus, the Jackal's sister and the Archgovernor's daughter. And I thought that was a really neat twist, and props to Pierce Brown for keeping me guessing on Mustang's true intentions there at the end, because I truly did not know whether or not Mustang was actually going to betray Darrow there at the end of the book, or if she was actually going to stick with him after the investment and the relationship time that she had spent with Darrow throughout this latter half of this book. So all in all, I definitely got to give Pierce Brown props for those neat little twists and wrinkles in the story that ultimately, I think at the end of the day, make my read through of Red Rising an above average read through and a better read than it would have been otherwise had Pierce Brown elected to stay on the more predictable route that I thought he was going to potentially go on. I am very grateful that that wasn't the case, and it definitely makes me curious to see where we go from here in Golden Sun, now that Darrow is, in fact, the now new son, the new golden son of our golden arch-governor. And if I had to make any predictions as to what I think might happen in Golden Sun, I think it could go one of two routes. Either A, Darrow becomes too good of the Archgovernor's son to the point that maybe he kind of gets lost in the sauce in his method acting, to the point where Darrow actually truly believes himself to be the Archgovernor's son, and then something will happen, some complication will happen in the Golden Sun book that will cause Darrow to murder the Archgovernor's other children, aka Virginia/Mustang and the Jackal, and so therefore Darrow will be the Archgovernor's only child. Or my other prediction, he'll fall in love with the Golds, and he won't kill Mustang or the Jackal, but I think he'll start falling in love with Golden culture to the point that maybe he might turn his back on the Reds, and it will be this commentary by Pierce Brown that Darrow had sought to tear down the slave system that has long crippled this solar system empire. But in the end, eventually when Darrow reaches a point in his life where he commands so much power potentially at his disposal, when he commands a fleet at his disposal, he will instead use it to continue enslaving the Reds, propagating this system that he sought to destroy. And it will be just this very sad and very subversion of expectations, this heartbreaking thing. And it's like, oh, the Darrow who's going to save us all wound up being Darrow, the most vile, vicious villain this galaxy has ever seen. So that's my second potential prediction for Golden Sun, or where the series could go. But again, these are just my predictions. I have no idea what's going to happen from this point on in the future, but I am intrigued to see where things go. I will say I'm not super excited about reading Golden Sun. I've heard that Golden Sun is the best book of the entire Red Rising series, so that does make me look forward to my read through of Golden Sun, which I think I will check that book out. But I'm not exactly clamoring to read it. It's not like when I first read a Game of Thrones that I was just so excited to read a Clash of Kings that I needed to know what happened next. Here, after reading Red Rising, I was just like, okay, that's cool. I mean, he's the Archgovernor's son now, I guess. Yeah, I'm not really fully invested in Darrow as a character. I mean, he's an all right character. He's probably the most fleshed out character in the series, but there's nothing really about him that calls to me. I'm not really super interested in seeing where this goes. I'm just mildly interested, but I'll still check it out. So yeah, those were my thoughts on the last couple of pages of Red Rising. Again, all in all, Red Rising was a above average decent time with some interesting twists and wrinkles along the way that made this story worthwhile and made me keep turning the page on this story, but not one that really makes me excited to continue the series. The story, albeit decently interesting, the characters aren't exactly the most exciting characters that I've read. Some of the characters, again, just felt like either archetypes or barely slightly deeper than archetypes. There's nothing really here that feels like a Sandan Glokta or feels like a Jaime Lannister. It just feels like decently okay characters partaking in a story that can occasionally be interesting. So those are my thoughts on Red Rising as a whole. If you are looking for a science fiction book to read, or if you're brand new to science fiction and you've never read science fiction or much less dystopian science fiction, then I think Red Rising could be a good book worth checking out. However, if you personally have more books under your literary repertoire and you have experience with the A Song of Ice and Fire series, you have experience with the First Law trilogy, and you even have experience with the Hunger Games and are expecting something close to that level of depth and intrigue and nuance, I would temper those expectations and just go into this book realizing that you're not going to get that, but you're just going to get a decently above average, but not super excellent time with this first book. But that about does it for my first ever read through of this Red Rising book. Definitely like, comment, and subscribe to help me defeat the evil golden emperor that is this YouTube algorithm. I would really greatly appreciate that. Thank you so very much, guys. Stay tuned for more book videos from myself. Like I said, I definitely am looking forward to checking out Golden Sun, and I do think I will post a video on my read-through of Golden Sun. However, if you prefer more of the traditional BookTube advocate review style videos that I predominantly do on this channel, then definitely let me know down in the comments section below that that is what you prefer. However, until then, thank you so very much for watching this video, and I'll catch you guys next time. The Advocate, out.